Welcome back to the Under the Pink podcast. I'm Kristen, and in the last episode, I talked about an overview and the history of what we call the New Romantics, an underground movement in the entertainment world whose goal is to shift the cultural mindset, push progress, and also to expose bad actors and work to improve systems. So make sure to check out that episode. And since it really covered the foundation of everything I'll talk about in this episode and in the future, I want to continue in that vein just a minute before I get into the fun part of the episode, timelines and clocks. First, make sure to follow me on all of my socials at UnderthePink7. You can also always find me at UnderthePink7.com. All of my links and everything will be in the description. I'll make a post for each of these episodes on all the socials so that if you have anything to add or if you have questions, that will be the place that we can discuss them all. No better way to make friends in the community, too, right? And I'm going to put the transcripts on Tumblr as well. So let's talk about a little background that I think is important. I believe that the first artists in this iteration of the New Romantics to work together so closely, or at least the first to use Easter eggs to hint to it, were Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, and Taylor. There is a reason that there are still so many diehard Hailers out there, and that's because there are a million ways the two of them have hinted at the other one in visuals, lyrics, interviews, and clothing. But what the Hailers are missing is that Louis does this too. In fact, Louis and Taylor seem to do this with each other even more than Harry and Taylor do. I should also mention there is a lot of evidence that Maddie Healy was also part of this extremely early on, like as early as 2012 or even earlier, just like the One Direction guys, and Beyonce too. But right now, I only have the connections on those people to Taylor and not yet to each other and the bigger group. So that's a work in progress. So I am focusing right now on the ones I know for sure. And one of the ways that Harry, Louis, and Taylor communicate Easter eggs is through clothing. And this is a skill that has been honed since 2012. Harry and Louis, especially, are so good at this. They use the names, colors, styles, numbers, prices, and designers to plant clues and egg for projects, events, or each other. I'll talk about some examples here in just a little while. But another way that the three, especially Easter egg, is by nods and references to specific music, films, TV show, and artists. I firmly believe that every reference we get to another piece of art or media is for a reason, and it communicates some theme or hint that plays a role in the storytelling of all of this. Are you guys familiar with the Once Upon a Time series, where they combine elements of different fairy tales, fables, and folklore and weave them all into one story? I think that's exactly what our new romantics do. Weave elements of hundreds of different references together, including outside media, their own lyrics and lore, current events, and the lyrics and lore of other new romantics into what I think will tell a complete story once it's all pieced together. The ultimate tapestry. It's very easy to look at things as just a fan of Taylor or Harry, whoever. And although I often come at these things through a Taylor lens, I am always trying to zoom out and look at the big picture. I kind of think that's been my whole role in this thing is like the big picture person, trying to figure out all of the things that are happening and who is using the symbolism and all of that. Yes, but why? How does it all fit together? What role does everyone play? What are the goals? I'm always checking out all of the muse theories because all of those connections are important, even if they aren't romantic. All of the lyrical connections, and especially all of the relationship and business connections. Everything plays its own part in the story. One other critical aspect is numerology. Taylor has said that numerology runs her life, and she definitely means it. She uses numbers in everything she does, and I really learned the extent of this when I was analyzing the tour spreadsheet. The numbers for the tour are so interconnected, and every part of it was so intentional. It's undeniable and freaking seriously wild. I have a couple TikTok videos about the numbers that I can link in the description, but even in those, I barely scratch the surface. I will give some examples later in this video or maybe in the next episode. But when it comes to numerology, the idea is to reduce all of the numbers to the smallest possible number. So, like 26 becomes 8 because you add those two numbers together. However, when we reduce numbers like this, it very quickly all of the numbers start to feel connected because there are only 9 base numbers after all. So, for the sake of making legitimate connections, I don't take that into account very often. Also, Taylor has said that to her, 31 is just 13 backwards, meaning that numbers can be flipped and mean the same thing. I do take this into account for Taylor, but not necessarily when we're making connections to other artists. Sometimes, but basically, there are a lot of different ways that numbers can be legitimately manipulated in ways that Taylor does do herself and talks about. But I want to make sure that connections I find between artists are truly intended to be there and aren't being forced. There are plenty of numbers that have a lot of significance. Anniversaries, album release dates, a million different things can be important. But the most important numbers currently are 112. There's a whole theory around the use of 112, which was started by Nikki King on TikTok. 112 is used constantly by Taylor, but by the others too. The numbers 38 and 83 are used even more than the 112 by everyone, but again, especially by Taylor, as far as we can tell. It's tied into almost everything she does. Then Taylor played the song Glitch, and everything has changed on 6-3. And that number is used across the New Romantics as well. And the reverse too, 3-6. The number 7 is used by Harry and Taylor very consistently. And of course, Taylor's number is 13 and Beyonce's number is 4. I personally think that the number 9 is extremely important, but I think I'm the only one who thinks so. I need to make a video about that soon. Then the Karma coffee cup refers to the numbers 28, and 28 is also in the name of Louis Tomlinson's clothing company. Then, when Taylor did Midnight's Mayhem with me, she made sure to call attention to the numbers 83, like we talked about earlier, but also to 95. There are plenty more, but these are probably the biggest, as well as 55, a number I've been following for a couple of years now. Then there are also important cities like hometowns and cities that important things have happened in. So many ways for them to reference each other. And we'll get into more examples of the ways they do that later on. And usually, the way we can determine if it's a legitimate connection is if it's more than one thing combined. So, a reference to just a date or a number may not be connected, but if we have significant places or lyrics and lore combined with a number, that's where we start to see the connections. I hope that makes sense. So, moving on, I really want to talk about where I think we are in the timeline of it all. This is actually such an exciting time to be following pop culture because after years and years of buildup, I think we are very close to the finish line. There are a million reasons I think so, and I'm going to try to cover as many as possible in this episode and in the next one. So let's just get into it. So, first, I want to talk a little bit about clocks and timelines. I think that there have been many timelines over the years that have shifted or forced to change, and plans that have failed and been thwarted. And since I don't really think that there is one big finale, I don't think that there's one major timeline either. So, how I see it is that they have spent years lining up dominoes, and at some point, it will be time to turn around and start knocking them over. But it's also important to realize that this is a chess game, and there have been a million wins along the way, both large and small, and plenty of setbacks. So, to see the progress, we can go back to some of my earliest videos in spring of 2023. Now, I talked in the last episode about themes that were covered by other creators very early on and proven to be true. And there are plenty more of these that we could talk about, and we will. But for now, I want to focus on actual events that have happened since then. In those first videos, I said that I thought the intentions of the group was to expose bad actors and corruption in the music industry, and also how all of the people involved at the base level started in the industry as a kid. Well, since that time, Scooter lost all of his clients and they all announced it on the same day. Diddy has been exposed, and that has uncovered a whole network of corruption and abuse. Kendrick completely exposed Drake and started a whole conversation about and within hip hop culture. We have gotten several documentaries about what goes on behind the scenes for child actors. There have been laws changed for child influencers. Ticketmaster investigated by Congress. Cat Williams has spoken more openly than ever. And that's truly just the tip of the iceberg. There have been so many shifts in the music industry and exposures of abuse on all levels in the last 2 years. That is all incredibly important progress with lasting effects that ripple out much further than just the entertainment world. So, we said that we thought there was going to be exposure in the music industry, and that happened on many levels, exactly as predicted. It's so important to realize how much has been accomplished and how far we've come in the last 2 years. But with all that being said, I think we're finally at the point of reversing the clocks. In her mastermind choreography on Eras Tour, Taylor turns in a circle like a clock, and then she reverses and goes back the other direction. I think this represents going through a period of time and, like I said earlier, setting up major dominoes and then going back to knock them all down. Karma comes back around. Time travel, the upside down from Stranger Things, mirror images and negative images. There have been so many indications that we have to go back in order to go through. And while I think that Taylor and others have done that plenty of times, especially with the re records and even with the Eras Tour, we haven't gone back to the most symbolically important eras of all, her original era for debut and her redemption rebirth era for reputation. And of course, the lost era of karma. Taylor and other artists have been all telling their own story. And I really do think they all combine to make one tapestry of storytelling, overlapping and connecting. So far, we've gotten pieces of these stories, but they haven't yet given us the big picture. And I personally believe that they will. I'll talk more about that later, but I feel like it's undeniable that we have been building up to something. And now I think that we're finally entering the phase where Exile ends. In case you aren't familiar, Taylor has a music video for the song Bejeweled from Midnights. And in the video, she has a pocket watch. The watch says Exile ends and it flashes a 3 and then a 2. Everyone has always assumed that that was a countdown, but there was never a number 1. And I think that's because the 3-2 represented March 2nd, not a countdown. And I think that's when the new era began. The era that ends exile, whatever that means, and turns back the clock to knock down the dominoes and enable all of our tortured poets and new romantics to speak now. So here's where we get to the fun stuff. Compiling connections and Easter eggs and clues, just like old times. These types of theories used to be the majority of my content, but I haven't made them in quite a while now. The connections are so vast now and intertwined that it can be really difficult to put them all in a post or in a video that makes any sense at all. But this one, even though it has many, many facets and side quests, will be fun to lay out for you guys. So let's just dive into my latest theory. Exile ended in March, spring breaks through. There is definitely room for improvement on the name, so send me your suggestions. This is a sprawling, layered web of connections that are entirely my own work, and it's taken a ton of time. So if you do talk about this theory or these connections, please give credit with links to my content. I will be very thankful, and I will always do the same for other creators. A reminder also that anyone I mention will be linked in the description. It's also really important to note that the interpretation of the information is mine, but the information itself are all verified facts. A theory is just a theory, but the connections are there regardless of how we interpret them. So even if you disagree with my interpretation and theory, don't disregard the information itself. if you add up all these connections and get a different results, I would love to hear it. I am always interested in hearing different interpretations, as long as all of the information is taken into account. So, first, let's just talk about the basic overall things that point us to this point in time, and I think to this year in particular. Numerically, this year just feels really right, okay? When we're talking about clocks, the Midnight's clock on the back of the albums was split into 4 segments. She's a clock, right? In the Hunger Games, which is a theme we'll talk about shortly, they had special games each quarter, the quarter quell, every 25 years. With the Y2K themes being so predominant in pop culture the last few years, 25 just feels like a good solid number. Then let's talk about why this year feels right for Taylor. Taylor had the first pressing of a single for herself in 2003, 22 years ago. A single called Lucky You with Smoky Black Nights on the B side, and we'll come back to this. It's also been 15 years since she released Speak Now, the record that she wrote on her own, 13 years since 2012, when I feel like this started in earnest, and the Red Album. 11 years since the release of 1989, which changed everything for her. 9 years since Snakegate. Like I said, I think nine's important. 7 years since she signed with her new label, Republic Records, and since her Reputation tour, which she said transformed the way she thinks about everything and reacts to everything around her. 5 years since quarantine changed everyone's plan. And these are all excellent Taylor related numbers. If we were looking at 2026, the numbers would be 23, 16, 14, 12, 10, 8. These aren't Taylor numbers. Instead, we have 22, 15, 13, 11, 9, 7, 5. I never really realized that odd numbers were so connected to Taylor, especially since her records usually come out on even years. So that's interesting. It's also been exactly 10 years since Zayn left One Direction, which was obviously a huge turning point for all of them. But besides just the years, I think that there are a lot of things that have been pointing us to this time of year, spring. In fact, I am much more certain about the time of year than I am the actual year, to be honest. It's also more complicated than just predicting a release date or something like that, because, like I said before, I don't think that there's going to be just one event that happens that wraps up this whole journey. And I think that things have been happening along the way, of course, just like we talked about. Really big things. But there has been so much setup. And so, of course, I'm looking for a period of time when things will shift and start heading toward the metaphorical finish line. And I really do think that we're at this point. Like we talked about earlier in the Bejeweled music video, Taylor has a pocket watch that says Exile ends, and it flashes from 3 to 2 and never the 1. I really do think it could represent 3/2, March 2nd. And I think that's when the clock started going back. I think March 2nd to June 2nd is a segment on the clock when things really get moving. I'm going to call this Q1 just to make it easier to talk about, and I'll explain to you why I think that is as we go on. But talking about this period of time, let's look at some basic dates and events that have all been theorized about in the past couple years by all kinds of people. There are so many of them happening during the Q1 timeframe. First of all, it's Lent. We talked in the last episode about the religious themes in Taylor's visuals and lyrics, especially in TTPD. Check out MC Pant's Twitter and TikTok accounts for their posts about Easter and rebirth over the last couple of years. We also got the Joe breakup announcement on Easter in 2023. I've also been watching 420, April 20th, for a couple of years for multiple reasons, and this year Easter happens to fall on 422. What if I roll the stone away? And of course, an obvious one is the 2-year Eras Tour anniversary on March 17th. This feels especially notable because the release of the new Hunger Games book is on March 18th this year, almost to the day of the Eras Tour anniversary. On the opening day of Eras, Taylor released the Taylor's version of 4 different individual songs. Both of the songs she created for the Hunger Games, Eyes Open and Safe and Sound, plus If This Was a Movie and All the Girls You've Loved Before. The first 3 go together so perfectly, and we really need to figure out thematically why she also released All the Girls on the same day. But when eras began, there were a lot of posts about Taylor's nods to the Hunger Games. I saw posts on TikTok from user LG Betty, Alex Chaser, who mods the Fell Down the Rabbit Hole Swiftgron Reddit community. I know that there were others, but these are the ones that I remember for sure. But Taylor released these songs, and then during the Archer on tour, she does the Archer's pose and points the arrow to the back of the stadium ceiling in the same way that Katniss does at the end of Chasing Fire. And then it looks like flames go around the edge of the stage, and the stage rains fire until the Fearless era is introduced. And when we think about the arrow in the movie being the thing that ignites the revolution and shattering the facade of the arena, and all of the nods to the Wizard of Oz, aka revealing the man behind the curtain, that's a pretty deliberate point that she could be making. And since eras began, Suzanne Collins has given us the Snakes and Songbirds movie and this new book too, Sunrise on the Reaping. But another thing to note is the Bejeweled Pocket Watch. In the first Hunger Games book, the head game maker shows a pocket watch with a mockingjay on it to let Katniss know that he was in with the resistance. So, aside from the Hunger Games, another big one is the Blood Moon, which obviously is mentioned in the Glitch lyrics and happened on March 13th and 14th. It was the first total lunar eclipse since November 7th and 8th, 2022. Taylor also mentioned the Mercury retrograde, April 24th of 2023, which could have definitely been a hint for Tortured Poets Department since it came out during a Mercury retrograde. But we are in one right now too until April 6th. Then there's the time change. Thematically, it just fits, so I couldn't leave it out. Then, of course, there's the St. Patrick's of it all, March being the lucky month, St. Patrick's with all of the green, the only 1989 outfit we didn't get on the Eras tour, and a color that for some reason most of the fandom associates with both debut and reputation. St. Patrick's is Ireland, right? Red hair, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the smallest man, magic, leprechauns. Much of the Red TV was recorded in Ireland, and there's even an itty bitty kitty committee location in Belfast. That's the name of the home recording studio that Taylor has in all of her residences. So she had a home base in Belfast, whether permanent or temporary, and I've kind of had a mantra for a few years. Everything goes back to Red. All roads lead back to the Red album. So Red TV being recorded there feels important. There's also a wall painted in Belfast that says Taylor Swift balked here, which means threw up. And that leads us straight to the Hits Different lyrics. I threw up on the street. I'll post a picture on my Instagram of that wall. She also did a couple of interviews talking about how much inspiration she drew from Game of Thrones for Reputation and also for her world building and her Easter egging. Game of Thrones was also filmed in Belfast. I had a whole theory thread about Ireland on Twitter when she was headed there for the Eras tour. I was so sure something was going to happen there. She was in Ireland on June 28th, 29th, and 30th for the Eras tour. She was also in Ireland on the same dates for the 1989 tour. And the 30th happens to be the anniversary of the master situation with Scott and Scooter. On the 1989 stop, she introduced a new, slower version of Holy Ground. That will come into play later. At Eras on the 30th, she sang a mashup of Clara Bow and The Lucky One, and then You're on Your Own, Kid. That was the night that Stevie Nicks was in attendance too. This was also the first time that she repeated an outfit from the 1989 sets. And she did it on the first and last day of the Ireland dates, bookending them, so just a couple days apart. That outfit was the colors of the Irish flag, green on top and orange on the bottom. So, okay, if you listened or watched, the YouTube video for that episode is so much better than the audio. The last podcast episode before I took a break, it was about some anonymous messages that I believe were left by Taylor herself or someone on her team or close to her. These messages are all signed by a pumpkin emoji, orange on bottom and green on top, just like the bookended outfits. Now, speaking of those Anon messages, there are some other Anon messages submitted to the same blog. There are quite a few different ones, And I haven't personally spent the time to verify whether they are real like I did the other ones. I know a lot of people have verified them, but I haven't personally. So I just want to make that clear. I definitely don't think that all of the Anon messages submitted to that blog are real, but some of them seem to be. So, anyway, the Anon submitted a post mentioning Kazemi, which is an astrological event. Now, here's the actual post, which was submitted on the anniversary of Fearless TV, April 9th. Is a choice at all when shadows hold the day, or one must await Kazemi to illuminate the way? Click 1 2, clack thrice 4, hold your honor steady, dash traditions once more. Shadow falls upon the ground, shifts in perception. Grounds break, pink moon, all faded in perfection. So it says Kazemi will light the way, meaning that it would be right at the beginning of the journey, right? It also mentions a pink moon, which is a song that I think is worth talking about another time. But in regards to events and moments in time, the Kazemian Saturn was on March 12th, and the pink moon coming up is on April 12th. Where it says shadow falls upon the ground, that made me think of Groundhog's Day. The groundhog seeing its shadow to determine when spring is coming, and that was on February 2nd, 2/2, exactly 1 month before 3/2. So anyway, think about the lyrics to Ivy. Spring breaks loose, the time is near. All of these things pointing to the spring or the period of time we're in now. Kazemi, the pink moon, the time change, spring. It all fits so well, right? And then we'll get summer. I tend to think that that's when we will get a lot more of the controversial truth coming out. A cruel summer, right? But the end game has to be the fall, in my opinion. The autumn of All Too Well is too thematically important. I do think, especially with Folklore and Evermore, she emphasized the importance of seasons in her albums for a reason. Anyway, there's so many different things we could talk about in regards to all of this, but I don't want to get too off track. Another egg that I think points us directly to March and spring specifically is one I haven't ever heard anyone talk about, and that is cherry blossom season. So, on my TikTok channel, I have an enduring theory from 2023 that I've spoken about a million times, and that is that Speak Now is coming back around. I don't necessarily mean the record itself is coming again, but the concept. Speaking out about whatever Taylor's been holding back all of these years, whether that has to do with muses or her sexuality, things that she has witnessed in the industry. She's been singing about secrets for many, many years, and TTPD made it even more clear that there are plenty of things that she has buried for the sake of her career, her fans, or the media. And so I think her need to speak now is a pretty motivating factor in this whole thing. That may come in the form of a documentary, a book, vault tracks, videos. The possibilities are endless. And I'll link one of my Speak Now Theory TikToks in the description. But during Speak Now TV release, Taylor posted a picture of herself lying in cherry blossoms. It was a pic that didn't match the rest of the branding for the release, and no one really understood why she posted it. The only other time we've seen Taylor with cherry blossoms is in the Begin Again music video. In that video, she's also in Paris, by the way. So with Begin Again, we have a song from Red once again, talking about fresh beginnings, just like the song that she paired with Glitch. Everything has changed, also from the Red era. So, cherry blossom season generally runs from late March to April, and the blooming can last for a few days to a fortnight. The two biggest cherry blossom festivals in the world are in Tokyo and in Washington, D.C. This is so significant. The trees in DC were a gift in the name of Tokyo to DC to signify the relationship between the two cities. I have a whole timeline of connections that involves Tokyo that we'll get into soon, and I'm very certain that all of this is connected to politics. So the two big festivals being in Washington, D.C. and Tokyo fit so perfectly. The festival parade even used to go past Trump Tower until Trump filed to reroute it. The festival in DC goes on for weeks, this year from March 20th to April 13th, and includes all kinds of activities from a music festival, contest, etc. So, does the Speak Now cherry blossom picture represent a period of time in the spring where she will speak now, connecting politics with her own story? Well, that's putting an awful lot into a single picture. It's not just Taylor either. Harry and his team have posted cherry blossom season, and recently Ariana and Selena Gomez have worn cherry blossoms designs on the red carpet. I'll put these pictures on my Instagram too. But one last thing about the cherry blossoms, Lana has a song called Cherry Blossoms, which is worth noting because while it was released on her Blue Banisters record in 2021, it was originally written in 2013 for Ultraviolence, and she wrote it at the same time that she wrote Nectar of the Gods, a song about fame and celebrity. She called it a nursery rhyme at one point, with lyrics about secrets, swinging in trees, and other familiar themes. Lana and Taylor have a lot of lyrics that seem to speak to each other, similar to Taylor and Harry. So, although Lana is kind of a wild card, especially politically, I still think we want to take her into account, especially since she is on Midnights and especially Snow on the Beach in particular. And like I said, when I talk about pointing to this period of time, I don't necessarily mean one thing is happening. We are turning things around and getting more to the answers part of the journey versus the continuing to ask questions, knocking down those dominoes. Okay, so I have so much more that I want to talk about. I haven't even scratched the surface just in regards to why I think we're meant to be looking at the spring. There's so much more. But these are really info heavy episodes, and I don't want it to be too overwhelming. So I'm going to end this here, and then I'm going to record the next episode. Part 3 of Spring Breaks Through, whatever we decide to call it, is going to immediately follow this one. So make sure to listen or watch it. Please make sure to follow me on my socials, especially YouTube, and leave a comment there or rate this podcast 5 stars on your podcast app. You can find all of my links at UnderthePink7.com, or I'm just UnderthePink7 everywhere. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
It must be counterfeit. I think there's been a glitch.